Support comes from BECU, a member-owned credit union putting people over profit, offering financial services and support to the community with access to local financial centers, over 30,000 ATMs, and online resources at becu.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. There were cheers and hugs and reunions as the U.S. opened its borders to vaccinated foreign travelers Monday. But not everything is back to normal. We'll check in with reporter Tom Banse, who was there when the first ferry docked in Port Angeles. But first, let's get you caught up. Boeing is facing resistance from its workers over an upcoming deadline to get vaccinated to keep their jobs. Reuters reports that more than 11,000 employees are seeking an exemption ahead of the federal deadline for all government contractors to be vaccinated or regularly tested. That's almost 9% of Boeing's entire workforce. Company executives were reportedly expecting more like 2%. President Biden's mandate went into effect last week, but was quickly put on hold while an appeals court sorts out legal challenges. The family of a Western Washington University student who was killed during the Astroworld concert in Houston over the weekend plans to sue. 21-year-old Axel Acosta was one of 8 people crushed to death Friday as people rushed the stage during a performance by Travis Scott. An attorney who represents the Acosta family and more than 30 other families called the deaths senseless and unnecessary. And in sports, some good news for the Seahawks. Russell Wilson's sprained finger has healed and he's cleared to return. He'll be back on the field when the Seahawks play Green Bay this weekend. And an update on UW head coach Jimmy Lake and the investigation into a sideline incident where he appeared to hit one of his own players. UW athletic director Jen Cohen says she doesn't think it was intentional or deliberate, but the school can't have any tolerance for a coach having that kind of interaction with a student. He'll be suspended a week without pay and miss this Saturday's game against Arizona State. Yesterday was a big day for long-overdue reunions. The U.S. opened its border to foreign travelers. Planes at SeaTac welcomed passengers from all over the world. And for the first time since March 2020, Canadians traveled south to visit family, shop, and travel. Northwest News Network reporter Tom Banse headed to the border to capture the scene. He was in Port Angeles catching the first ferry arriving from British Columbia for almost 2 years. Hey, Tom, good to talk to you.
Yes, it was a good day.
So you were at the border yesterday as it reopened for the first time to Canadians heading to the U.S. Tell me about the mood. What did you see?
It was so celebratory. I mean, I was expecting people to be happy, but Port Angeles turned out. I mean, there were close to 100 people. Flags waving, American flags, Canadian flags, lots of handmade signs saying, "We love our Canadians, welcome Canadians." And I missed this because I didn't ride the ferry, but in Victoria Harbor, the fireboat came out and gave a big watery cannon salute to the ferry, and the whale watch boats came out and escorted the MV Coho into the harbor on its first trip north before it picked up what turned out to be a full load of mostly Canadian snowbirds who drove on with their RVs in part and can't wait to presumably get to the American Southwest to their usual routine of escaping to the warmth from the Canadian winter, as well as families came off the ferry. And they had some emotional reunions at the dock where you could instantly tell these people are relatives who haven't seen each other for almost 2 years.
Oh, Tom, that sounds so exciting. Tell me, did you see any big reunions? Did you witness anything?
I did, yes. So I met a mother who lives on Vancouver Island who embraced her daughter, who's Canadian but working in Seattle. First time in 2 years. Very emotional moment.
It's been so long since I've seen her, and we're so happy to be back, be able to come back. Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see my family again. I've been in the U.S. for the last 2 years without being able to see any of them.
They're going to spend a week together before mom goes back home. There were other families where more extended relations haven't seen each other. You know, Port Angeles and Victoria are only separated by about 17 miles. So 17 miles of water, but you can see Victoria across the Strait of Juan de Fuca. They can see the lights of Port Angeles at night. There are lots of families on both sides, and they have been kept apart for the most part for a year and a half. The Canadian side reopened in August non-essential travel, and U.S. did not reciprocate until yesterday. But quite a few people seem to have waited until this week, where the border was open in both directions, to have that happy reunion.
Well, 17 miles feels pretty long over these last 2 years, I'm sure, Tom. This is great news for families for the holidays.
It is. And the other thing I should point out, which many people pointed out in Port Angeles, and they weren't trying to rain on the parade, but wanted to make it clear that from their point of view, we're not quite back to the way it was before the pandemic, because the spur of the moment traveler, the casual visitor who just wants to, take the ferry over or drive across the border in Whatcom County for a few hours maybe of shopping, filling the fuel tank with cheap American gas, those people are not going to come in large numbers yet, because you have to have what's called a PCR test to get back into Canada. So both directions, you need to be fully vaccinated to be allowed across. But Canada is requiring everyone, Canadian, Americans, anywhere in the world, when they go back north across the border, to have a negative COVID test. And not just any test, not the home test, the rapid antigen test, but the sophisticated PCR test where you swab your nose and it goes to the lab, and it takes overnight. If you're lucky, it might be 2 days to come back. And you might have to pay for that out of pocket, especially if you're Canadian.
Tom, that has been a point of contention, that returning COVID test. Some businesses want that requirement ended because they say just what you said. It'll discourage quick visits across the border. It could be really expensive to get that test. And that would significantly impact places like Point Roberts, Bellingham, and Blaine that really rely on that cross-border commerce.
You're absolutely right. So in Port Angeles, a lot of those people coming across today and regularly, they're not just going on a day trip. They're going to spend at least a couple nights, maybe looking at the rainforest, going down to Seattle, longer trip, who knows. But Whatcom County, as you were saying, they're, easily half the crossings are day trippers. They're coming to pick up parcels in Blaine, where there's a remarkable profusion of parcel drop-off stores. And, your free shipping only works if you're ordering in the U.S., usually for a U.S. address. So the Canadians who are clever, they have it sent to Blaine and go pick it up. But nowadays, you're not going to do that if you have to pay $175 to have your nose swabbed and stay overnight to get your package. So those businesses are hurting. I noticed last time I was in Blaine, a lot of them are closed. Same in Point Roberts, where, that's a destination for a lot of people just to get away for the day. It's a little more rural, right next to the doorstep of Vancouver, BC, and the gas is cheaper and the groceries are cheaper. And it's really quiet in Port Roberts. And the Chamber of Commerce fellow there is not that excited this week, because that testing requirement is a deterrent, except for people who are going to make a longer trip out of it.
Yeah, I'm sure those border towns would really appreciate that requirement lifted just in time for the Christmas shopping season, for sure. Tom, you have seen a lot while on this story. Border reunions at Peace Arch Park, where families and friends were gathering every weekend so they could be close to each other. How does what you saw there compare to what you saw yesterday?
Well, like that scene you mentioned at the Peace Arch, that was a very personal level. What today really struck me was the community spirit, but it was still an unusual day. I talked to the captain of the MV Coho, the private ferry that goes 2 times a day between Victoria and Port Angeles, and he was struck by just the community spirit on both sides of the border.
A lot of snowbirds going south. They've been waiting. It's been 19 months, so they missed out quite a bit last year. So it was really good to see a full boat this morning. There wasn't a space to spare, so very encouraging to see. And then just seeing everybody turn out in both Victoria and Port Angeles, just the way the community loves this boat and relies on this boat. It's such a vital link between the two communities. It was great to see everybody so excited to see the boat back in service.
So it's a big deal, the border being closed for so long and now reopening, and people have the sense that things are starting to get back to normal.
All right, Tom, what happens now?
Well, at this point, you want to see the vaccination rates get a little bit higher in the U.S., so the Canadians are a little more confident in letting us come over more easily, or just, having commerce flow back and forth more smoothly. I mean, going back to before 9/11, you hardly realized there was a border there between the U.S. and Canada. It was so easy to go back and forth. Since 9/11, there's definitely an international border there. It's been closed for non-essential crossings, which is the vast majority of crossings now for the last 19 months. Business travelers were able to go back and forth. Truck drivers were always going back and forth. But there's still a little more confidence building that has to happen that, and I couldn't venture a guess when we're going to get back to the pre-pandemic routine on the northern border. But, sometime next year, I think we'll get there, but I couldn't tell you when.
Tom Banse, it sounds like it was a fantastic day and the start of at least our new normal between the U.S. and Canada.
That's right. A start on the way back. Ways to go still, but definitely a happy week for a lot of people.
Regional correspondent Tom Banse is with the Northwest News Network. Always good to talk to you.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening today. Caroline Chamberlain Gomez produced today's show. Our production team is Jenny Cecil Moore, Diana Opong, Clare McGrane, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy.